Hey everyone, welcome to Byte of the Week, your weekly digest of all news, all things news in the startup land of San Francisco, Silicon Valley, the Bay Area. Let's jump right in. So earlier this week on Sunday, we had the Super Bowl, and it was just a mind-blowing comeback. I think the real star of the show, of course, was Brady and the folks really pulling it out in the fourth quarter and just getting that astonishing comeback from being down 25 points. It was amazing. The other big star of the show, of course, was Lady Gaga, just really putting on a good show, a very entertaining show for folks. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I think the star of that show, besides her, was Intel's drones. It's been crazy to watch the progression and development of drones over the past few years. I remember, the first time, and this was probably, your first exposure to it as well. Drones was like, oh, we're sending drones over to the Middle East to like kill people and stuff. And that was sort of like, a whole other controversy and concept over there. But in the past couple of years, they've become more accessible, more mainstream, and and people have started coming up with like interesting business applications for it as well. So now it's not just like a hobby thing that you do with your friends, right? Maybe you track inventory in a warehouse. Maybe, you do a light show at the Super Bowl. And so drones have just this really, really untapped potential. Also, delivery drones, that's a huge thing, right? Delivery drones, inventory tracking, things that in the past might have required a human to like carry your pizza to you, carry your box to you. That might not be the case in the future. And so Intel it was a very strategic and very wise move on their part to use a high visibility platform like the Super Bowl as their opportunity to like debut this technology. The light show that they made with it, it went off without a hitch. It looked really, really good. I think drones are even more in people's minds now as this really awesome opportunity, and it'll be cool to see where that goes in the future. Next up, another one of the really, really awesome things that happened this week. Uber hired a former NASA person named Mark Moore to head up their Uber Elevate initiative, which, if you are a fan of the show Silicon Valley, sounds suspiciously like Huli's Moonshot Initiative. And I think that to a large extent that's definitely true, where they're just sort of like coming up with wild ideas and spending tons of money on it for the sake of good publicity. I think that they're certainly getting it, and their first initiative is flying cars. So that's the sci-fi future that we've been promised for decades. It obviously has not been happened. It's just a mind-blowingly huge insurance liability. And that's probably why it hasn't happened, but they're going after it anyways. I hope they do. I don't think that it'll come soon, but I hope that I live to take a flying Uber ride at some point in the future. Just like I hope to take an autonomous Uber ride in the autonomous driving Uber ride in the nearer term future. So the Crunchies were this week as well, and if you're not familiar with the Crunchies, it's basically the news website TechCrunch does this award show every year, and it's in the grand tradition of Silicon Valley people patting themselves and each other on the back. It's basically an award show that recognizes various achievements in the industry, kind of like the Academy Awards, but for tech companies. So a couple that I wanted to call out in particular: Slack won Best Startup. I think that was very well deserved. I have, and I'm sure that you have too, used various chat clients, whether it was IRC a long time ago, whether it was Yammer, whether it was HipChat. There are so many chat clients, and they were all just like pretty okay. They were pretty okay. Slack comes along, and in the same way that Apple elevated the home computer experience from like, this is a thing that you do, to this is a beautiful and like fun and cool experience. Slack did that for group chat, and now it's everywhere. Everybody uses it. Most companies use it. My company certainly uses it, and it's even made the jump in that it's not just something B2B, but it's also become fairly B2C, as people who just happen to enjoy it have also, taken it to their hobbies and, formed groups around that. It's a really, really cool thing that Slack is doing, and they certainly deserve that award. Another really cool company that won this year was one called Otto, OTTO. They focus on autonomous trucks for shipping. And that's a really cool opportunity because, of course, being a trucker involves a lot of hours of just driving, and it's ripe for disruption. An autonomous truck could just be running 24 hours a day, and that would cut delivery times down, cut costs obviously, or cut costs potentially, because that depends on whether or not existing trucks can be retrofitted with this technology, or if it has to be cooked into new trucks as a whole. But that's a tangent. It should be interesting, and the unfortunate, I guess you could say, social cost is that people whose livelihoods have been dependent on being truckers is potentially going to go away if Otto continues to succeed and continues to push their technology out into the mainstream. They certainly got a big bump in that they were acquired by Uber, so they have a larger capital pool and just greater resources on their hands to actually make that a reality. So we'll see if that goes, and I think it's likely that it will. I think it's likely. Best app, you could imagine this. The Crunchy Award for Best App went to Pokemon Go. I think that for a long time we were all getting out of the house more, walking around, catching them all, and it's a really, really cool and unique experience that apps had not really had in the past, because of the fact that you had to actually physically go places to access different parts of the game. It's a really cool mechanic. I've certainly walked hundreds of kilometers with, my Charmander buddy turned on and, getting that candy. I think that that's a really cool way to gamify exercise. I think that it's a very socially positive thing that they're doing, and it's a lot of fun. It's a very fun game. One of the most innovative companies to show up on the scene lately, and I learned about it this week, is one called Sewbo. It's all about making or automating garment production. So in the past, and coming up to the present time, a lot of manufacturing has been automated by machines, but clothing is one that has kind of defied that trend, because sewing is very, very difficult. And sewing is difficult because fabric is flexible, so it's hard to hold it in place while you put the seam down and everything. This company, Sewbo, and I'll have a link for all this in the description, of course. What Sewbo did is they came up with a way to make fabric very stiff with a chemical treatment. So the material is stiff now, and a robotic arm runs it through a sewing machine, so the stitch gets laid down. And then once all of the stitching is done, the garment gets dipped in water, and the chemical, erodes away. It's water soluble, and what you're left with is a t-shirt that was, in fact, totally made by a robot. I think that that's really, really, really awesome. I would certainly encourage you to watch the video. It's an interesting, so at the present time, a lot of the employment in developing countries is things like, it is related to garment manufacture. And if Sewbo's technology takes off, that could be going away potentially over the next several decades, right? And there's sort of like two sides to that coin. One of which is like, people will be like, oh, sweatshops, like bad deal for folks in developing countries, bad working conditions, and so on. But if you took that away, and there's a very real chance that like if people are working in those shops, that's like the best opportunity that they had available. And if you just take that away, you're just taking away that opportunity for employment. Maybe and probably it will force them to look elsewhere. And so there's kind of like two sides to that coin, two sides to that automation. The social cost is there, but then from the business's standpoint, you know they don't have humans as a liability anymore. The machines can still run 24 hours a day, and it's so costs going down, efficiency going up, and it's like at some social cost, but are sweatshops like worth protecting? I don't know. To be honest, it's a very complicated thing, and the world is a lot more complicated than you or I or really anyone could possibly imagine. I'm just saying that like this is a thing that's out there, and as a tech person, I just think it's pretty neat. But that's as far as I'd go with that. So thanks so much for watching. This has been your Bite of the Week. I'll see you all next week.